Crowdfunding. It works well for magazines, but what do you need to think about? This is Making Money from Magazines. So today I'm here with John Power from Wyrd Science magazine, and we're going to talk about Kickstarter. Hi John, how you doing?
Very good, thank you.
So tell me then, what are some of your do's and some of your don'ts of getting started in Kickstarter? Because you've had a long and illustrious career with your magazine on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I publish a magazine called Wyrd Science. It's about tabletop games, and I think the first thing we've done 3 Kickstarter campaigns, which have all been relatively successful, increasingly so. I've also backed an unholy amount of crowdfunding campaigns myself, much more than I should have, but we'll come on to that. I think the key thing is when you take a product to Kickstarter, whether it's a magazine or anything, that shouldn't be your first step. You should, you want to try and build at least some of an audience first. And I think that's really important with magazines because, I mean, essentially, if you're doing that, you're not EMAP, you're not Bauer, you're doing this because it's a passion for a particular niche subject. So you want to kind of build an audience first that you kind of embed yourself in that community. Like, you don't have to spend years and years doing this, but certainly when I did the very first Kickstarter for Wyrd Science, at that point I'd been on, I'd set up kind of Wyrd Science social media accounts like 6 or 8 months beforehand, which I'd been slowly adding content to. I'd created like a weekly or fortnightly newsletter, and I'd gone out of my way to kind of be part of the community. So helping other people, promoting other people's new games or their Kickstarters and their ideas, and generally making sure that sort of even before you launch, you've got it doesn't have to be massive, but you've just got a bit of an audience there to sort of take you on your journey.
How much do you think that that is reliant on you as a human being then? So for do you think that if you're joining that community and being an active part of that community, how much do you think people are buying into you as opposed to the magazine, or does that even matter?
It very much depends on kind of what the subject is. And I mean, for me, for games, it's like there's a big community that existed. So it was a big part of doing it was, as I said, sort of getting the name out there and just showing that we were part of the community. We hadn't just appeared in and were trying to just grab money because we thought, oh, games have become big over the last decade or so. That we can just take it for granted. So we had to get in there. It's very hard then trying to find the right balance of how much of yourself do you put into it. I set up completely separate accounts for the magazine to my own personal accounts. And I generally kept my personal side just me moaning about everyday stuff, and then used the official accounts to kind of then talk about other people's games, promote it. And I think the way I do it is a lot of my personality, good or bad, does come across in that. And I'm a one-man operation. Everything I do is, I have other writers, but everything else from the social media, everything I kind of handle myself. So I think at that level, it'd been disingenuous to kind of try and be, too corporate or too kind of official. So, and people react better to that, if it's
Absolutely.
if you come across, even if you're branded as a sort of corporate account, which sounds a bit ridiculous for a one-man little magazine about wizards, but even if you can, get some of your personality across, and just it comes across so much better, and you get so much, or at least you used to get so much more engagement, and you can quickly sort of set yourself up and just become part of the scene, as it
Yeah,
were.
part of that
And
community, I guess.
yeah, and I think it's just not taking it for granted. I think people can really tell that if like you're just there to rinse people's wallets, whereas if
Yeah.
you put in as much time helping other people, then when it's your turn to be helped, they'll be there for you. And I think
Absolutely.
that's hugely important.
And what made you choose Kickstarter then? Was there already a large community of people interested in tabletop games on Kickstarter, or what were the other alternatives?
I think that's really important question to ask is, where is your community, and what is the right site? I mean, there are dozens of crowdfunding sites out there. Kickstarter is obviously like the biggest and the most well known, so that's going to be most people's reason to use that anyway. In terms of tabletop games that we cover, it's if unless you're like the biggest games company around, you're probably launching your new titles on Kickstarter, and that's been the case for I don't know, best part of a decade now, or 6-7 years, because it splits everything up into sections. So I can just click tabletop games and see everything's there. It will recommend stuff to me. I'll get constant amounts of emails telling me, oh, check this game out, check this out. So it's definitely the right site. Now, I think what is quite important to take into account is that Kickstarter is very good for creating a product. It's maybe not quite as good for launching a sustainable business, because it's generally, and I think for magazines this is important, because generally speaking, most people on Kickstarter, it's a one and done thing. It's like, here, buy my new wonderful game, or buy my new birdhouse, or all these kind of things that they do, or magazine or whatever. And people hand over the money, they get the thing at the end of it, hopefully get the thing, and then that's it. That's done. Maybe later on, in year 2 year, you launch a second product there. Obviously, with a magazine, generally speaking, you're hoping it to be quite regular, and that comes with, as we'll no doubt discuss, there are a few drawbacks to running crowdfunding campaigns, and so like one of the major things is you can get a good amount of money. I mean, we certainly have done okay out of it, but generally enough, you get enough money to produce the product and maybe a bit extra profit here or there. But if you're trying to really run a much bigger scale business, then there's probably better options. I was thinking, like, one of my favorite magazines is Electronic Sound. It's about electronic music, and they'd launched for a while. They'd got themselves a nice bit of a reputation, and then they did a crowdfunding campaign on a site called Crowdcube, which is a bit different to Kickstarter in that it's more like investing than backing. But certainly they've done it. Another magazine called Disco Pogo did it on Crowdcube. But again, these are magazines that have quite a good reputation that precedes them. People already know about them, trust them. And in that case, they're raising, tens, hundreds of thousands. And, obviously they're trying to compete with the likes of, the magazines you get in WH Smith's or whatever. But I mean, certainly if you're trying to test a product or see if there is a market for it, which was certainly, I mean, when we did the first issue of Wyrd Science, it really was just middle of lockdown. I needed something to do. This is an idea that had been rattling around in my skull for a few years, and I just wanted to give it a shot. Which, as we'll come on to, isn't probably the best way of doing it, because
what you mean was not much of a strategy. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to rate and subscribe here on YouTube. So how did you choose the goal that you went for then? How did you choose the figure that you went for?
I'd actually, by the time we launched the Kickstarter, I'd commissioned most of the features. Originally, it all spiraled out of control. Originally, it was going to be a fun, cool little like A5 zine.
Yeah.
I'd paid for most of all the editorial. I'd commissioned a fair bit of artworks and photo shoots. And what I really looked at was, I just need the money to pay for the print costs. I thought, if I can raise a few thousand, and I think I kind of wanted about 3 or 4, that will pay for all the print costs. I'll sell a few afterwards. I'll claw the money back one way or another. I wouldn't have lost any money, but it would be fine. As it happened, I set the goal for the very first one of just £1,000, and we ended up raising just under 6,000. Something to bear in mind is you obviously want to set a realistic goal, because once you hit it, you're kind of committed to creating the product. Doesn't happen every time. People do bail out, and that has happened quite often. But generally speaking, you're committed. So you want to at least make sure that if you only just hit your goal, you're not screwed in one way or another. That you're comfortable with whatever that loss is. Now, obviously, the obvious thing would be to set your goal at exactly what you need to make, or even a bit more if you want to make some profit. But there's certain things to, I don't want to get all kind of hack the algorithm, but there are certain things to bear in mind. There's a big culture on Kickstarter and crowdfunding in general of being able to kind of show, oh, wow, we funded in 30 seconds, some absolutely nonsense amount of time. That's like the campaign launched and within 2 minutes, we've raised all the money we need. And then you get to
So
be
we
like,
set our target at £5 and we actually needed 1,000.
yes,
Yeah.
and you see it. I mean, there are games out there by some of the bigger companies that raised 10 million or something like that, and their original goal was like 10,000. And it's obvious that they needed to raise at least 500,000 to be able to do what they wanted to do. But they get to show off and say, we hit it in this. And it's not just about showing off, though, because I think there's a couple of things that it plays into. One, I think people like backing the successful projects.
Yeah.
So, because some people have been burned on Kickstarter, or they just want to know they're going to get something. So when people see something has successfully funded, they're more likely to back.
A bit of kind of jumping on the bandwagon thing there as well, isn't
Yeah,
there?
there is that.
Want to be left out of the party.
There's also the fact that Kickstarter is very good for discovery. So if you're into X, it will recommend things that are like it. And if your thing is doing well, they're more likely to recommend it. There's a thing you can get called Project We Love, which is, I don't know, I can't exactly quantify how much it boosts you, but we've had it for all 3 of our projects. And it certainly doesn't hurt. And I can imagine that they're more likely to Kickstarter are more likely to give you that accolade, as it were, if they see that the project is doing well.
Yeah, they're not going to put Project We Love down for something that they think isn't going to be backed all the way, are they? Making Money from Magazines is made and sponsored by Crowdfinder Video, who make cost-effective video and podcasts for magazines. The graphics for the show were made by White Light Media. How do you keep that momentum then?
It's very tricky because, as I said, one of the key things I always think is have as much done well in advance. Because once you've created your campaign page and you've set it all out, and I always try to have at least 2 or 3 features already done, laid out, mocked up, so people can look at it and see. Because again, you're asking people to hand over money who might, especially if it's your first project, people might not know you from anyone else. You're sitting there saying, give me £10, or, for a magazine, it's only 10 quid or whatever, but for something else, it might be, 50, £100.
Yeah.
The more you can show them at the start, the better. But then once you've got it set up, you will get it's kind of a notification page. It has the same URL as your campaign will have when it goes live, but anyone can click on that and they'll be notified the second your campaign goes live. So ideally, before the campaign, even before you click go, you want to have a good amount of people actively following that campaign.
That's interesting. How do you promote that then? How do you promote a campaign that doesn't exist already? Is it just a kind of, we're going to be launching, so, look out for this, or register to see, when it actually launches kind of thing?
Yeah, pretty much. That comes back to the whole why I say don't just appear out of nowhere and go, hey, we're going to do a magazine about dogs or whatever, have some kind of backing or following, or on some level. Again, it doesn't have to be massive. I think our Twitter account had like 600 followers or 500 followers or something when we launched the magazine. And this was, but I mean, this was back in the day when Twitter was useful. Um, but you do, and just you need to encourage people, like anyone you know, even if they're not going to follow the account, get them to like click on that thing so they're at least, you build up numbers. You've got people watching the campaign because it's so important that when the campaign launches, you can, I think most people can tell if a campaign's going to be successful in the first 48 hours, because that's when you're going to get, I mean, essentially, you're going to get like 40% of your backers in the first 24, 48 hours. You're going to get about the same amount, 40% in the last 48, 24 hours. And then you have this lull right in the middle where you are going to freak out because, I mean, the worst thing you can do is, I mean, if you're not prepared, the other thing you can do, which is can be foolish, and I've done that, is you get this huge rush at the beginning and you think, oh my God, I'm going to make £200,000 on this and I'm a genius. And then suddenly day 3 rolls by and it's like no one's back in. Day 4, no one, and you're like, oh my God. And then you start panicking and you think, oh, what am I going to do? But you've just got to keep plugging away, because even if people aren't backing during those kind of that lull period, they are checking out the campaign. They might be following it. They might be making a note of it. Because that's where all these people rush in at the end. They're all, a lot of people are just waiting to the last minute for.
The psychology of it is fascinating, huh? How people buy within a time frame like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can crack it, then if you can figure out the code that works people's brains, and I'm sure there are, you see some people are phenomenally successful, and then there's all kind of marketing tricks and things you can use. But I honestly just think that you just got to plug away, and this comes back to what I was saying about getting a lot done beforehand. One is because you want to be able to show off to people that, oh, look, this is the kind of thing that you will get if you back us. But also because certainly in the first 2, I had I thought, okay, I'll plan a lot, but I'll probably spend like an hour a day, 2 hours a day, check in a bit here and there, post in here and there. And it doesn't, it's absolutely all consuming. Even if you're not doing anything, you're just sat there refreshing the button, waiting for like a single £5 pledge to come in, because, at that point you're absolutely desperate.
You get that
It's
little
crazy.
dopamine rush every time.
Yeah, and it's addictive and it's horrible. But yeah, it just takes over your absolute life. So it's one of those things you just got to keep going. But it's also a good process because, I mean, you can set your time for as long as possible. I think they generally say about 30 days is
Yeah.
kind of good. I did one that was, and again, all of them have this lull period, whatever happens. So I think on the third one, I thought, oh, I'm just going to do it for 3 weeks, just so I only have 1 week lull period. But
And was that better or worse?
uh, I mean, we made more money, but we probably could have made even more money. I
If you'd
mean,
had that extra week. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we did well on the third one, but probably, there were things when I look back and I think, oh, I could have done X, Y, and Z so much better and spent more time on it. But as I say, it's important for just being out there, and it's horrible because you get to a point where you're like, oh, I really don't want to just go onto Twitter and essentially like beg people to, because you start thinking, well, everyone who is going to see this has already, they've made up their mind one way or another. And you start to think, oh, what am I going to, I'm just annoying people.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of the delusion of anybody working in marketing, really, isn't it? That if they put out one message, then everybody who's following them has seen that. When actually it could be a tenth of the people, not even maybe 100th of the people. And
Yeah,
if you say
every
it
time.
100 times, then maybe you might reach everyone.
Yeah, I mean, every single time that you do, you will get at least one person back. And you never know, that might be the one that someone who hasn't seen you before sees and, retweets or whatever, and that
Yeah.
spreads. And suddenly, you get a cluster of 10 backers come in one afternoon, and you're like, oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
We had on our second issue or third issue, I was kind of, it was ticking over nicely. And then suddenly on the second weekend, where I was expecting nothing all weekend, I thought we'd probably get, 10 backers over the whole weekend. And we got like another 150 or something like that. And that's another really important thing of Kickstarter is when you are running a campaign, ideally you can update, you can post these updates, sometimes you don't have much to say, but it can help, you can be, just to reassure people that X, Y, and Z is happening, or just to, anyone who backing can look at that and see, or if they're not backing, they can see these updates and see that, there's lots happening. But also you can recommend other people's projects. And this comes back again to being part of a community. So now I always make a deal in like the middle bit where I think my campaign's going to be a bit of a lull. I'll take some time to recommend some other campaigns. And that's what someone else did for ours.
Great idea.
And we got literally, one person mentioned us in an update and we got 150 backers that weekend.
Awesome.
And it was a weekend when I wasn't expecting anything. So it was like, I woke up and I was like, oh my God, another $2,000 I did to the total.
What other things did you do apart from just like social posts? And I mean, that's really interesting that you connected up with somebody else and recommended them, and then that had a kickback for you. Did you like try to go on people's podcasts and things like that, or what other kind of marketing did you do to promote the Kickstarter?
It's a bit odd with a magazine because essentially you're asking other media to promote your what could potentially be a rival. So it certainly works easier if you're doing something that isn't a direct competition with someone else. And in a sense that worked for us because we were doing a print magazine and, not many people are stupid enough to try that. So, most, our peers or competition, however you want to find it, are online. So for us, for them, we were a kind of weird oddity. And again, you should be doing this 3 weeks, 4 weeks before your campaign even launches, maybe even longer for some things like podcasts, but reaching out to those. I appeared on a couple of podcasts. I mean, I'm clearly a natural at this. So if you are the kind of person that loves to speak in front of a camera or speak in front of a microphone, then there's, obviously there's going to be lots of opportunities out there to get the word out.
Did you plan for success, or did you think that you were going to fail?
I didn't really plan for success. I planned for like just about breaking even. So with the first issue, we had 400 backers or 450 backers. 300 of them were for a print copy of the magazine. The rest were, you could get it as a PDF, and I subsequently stopped doing that. But so we had like 300. So I went out and I had to check the numbers. And we did 500 copies for the first print run, nice for a little kind of zine project kind of thing. And I thought, well, I'll have 200 left over. I'll sell those at some point over the next, slowly over the next year or so. And the magazine got out, people got their first copies, and we sold the remaining 200 in about 10 days, 2 weeks.
Amazing. That's really cool.
And it was great. And I think that's a very key thing. So I've actually, here we go. So here's the very first issue, and it probably breaks every magazine rule in terms of, now I'm knocking things over. There we go. It breaks every rule in terms of like magazine covers because there's nothing on there. But there's the good thing about Kickstarter is you don't have to worry about having newsstand appeal. You're selling direct to people that know it and want it. So you can go a bit wild with the cover and be a bit self-indulgent. As I say, we like burned through those 200 copies in the space of, 10 days, which then left me with the problem of, okay, what now? Do I just move on to chalk it up and say, well, that was nice. Do I move on to the next one? But, I was getting people emailing, asking where, how can I get hold of this?
Yeah. Drunk on success, you thought, right, let's do a second issue. Is that what you thought?
Yeah. So I wanted to print up more of the first issue to sell it. But again, I didn't have huge amounts of money lying around. And having run record labels in the past and had boxes and boxes of vinyl just sat there unsold for years, I was like, I didn't want to end up the same with this. So, I mean, we did like a 300 print run. just to sell that. And of course, the unit costs were then so high that we were only, making a quid or two on each one. And then we did a third print run where we then did 1,000 extra copies. So we did like 1,800 of the first issue in the end. But obviously, if I just printed up 2,000, and like today, I still get each, this is 2.5 years on since it came out, 3 years even. And yeah, I still get people emailing me every week asking for copies of the first issue.
So there's the cost of the print, which is, obvious, I guess, but the cost of not economizing over the quantities, that's interesting. What other kind of hidden costs have you got then if you're using Kickstarter?
The real one that people come unstuck on is shipping, because there's various ways of doing it with Kickstarter. You can bundle the shipping rather than put the magazine at £10. You can put it at 13 or 15 and shipping is then free, or you can charge shipping afterwards. They've changed their system slightly, but it's very easy to get caught out. Certainly, as what happened with us, so the second issue came out, shipping just seemed to have broken down globally, and prices went up. And I think our shipping costs went up something like 30% between having run the campaign and actually sending the magazine out.
You can't really predict that, can you? I mean, is there anything you would have done differently in that situation?
I think with something like a magazine, it's having as much ready to go as possible. When it's like £100 product, you're generally speaking probably working off the same kind of profit margins. But if it's £100 product, and you're making £50 profit per unit, you lose, a quid here or there isn't going to kill you. But if you're only making £3 or £4 or £5, per unit profit, and suddenly there's an extra quid in, loss, then that's a real drain. I mean, I remember like running out and having to like buy a thermal printer to do all the labels and all these things that you just don't think of. Suddenly it's like, oh God, I've just spent 300 quid on a thermal printer that I'm going to use like once probably. But, if you just trying to make life easier, because obviously you've got CN22 forms and all that business if it's going abroad, and, try and make it as easy as possible. So when the second issue came in, I was like, okay, I worked with a fulfillment company, like a warehouse who did it. And they were really great for about the first 2 or 3 months. And then a lot of hidden COVID fees suddenly appeared and Brexit fees appeared. And suddenly I was in a situation where I was paying like 3 or 4 months after the second issue had come out. And obviously at that point, we were still selling a few day to day, but it was a trickle rather than a flood. But at that point, my warehouse fees had gone up from like £50 a month to 400-500 or something. And
That's
I was like, oh my God.
ridiculous.
Yeah, and suddenly you're desperately running around trying to sort that out. I lost a bit on that because obviously it took a month or a couple of months to sort that out, but we did find a better service, someone who is a newsstand who is very just focused on magazines.
Yeah, Newsstand are great, aren't they? They're one of our partners. They're awesome. What about other ways to make money then from Kickstarter? So, obviously you've got the actual basic of the magazine, but what else do you offer now what did you do in your third issue?
You have to give them a reason to back it. Now that might just be relying on, them being lovely people who love to see creative projects come to fruition, but more likely, we give people a bit of a discount if, normally we retail for like £10. I think we were selling it on Kickstarter. Certainly if you were backing early, you were getting it for like 8. And then if you back later in the campaign, you might get it for 9 or something like that.
Okay.
So you're not making, you're making enough to make the magazine, but not much else around that. So there's a few things you can do. One is, the biggest thing for us is selling the back issues. So when we did the third Kickstarter, obviously we were able to sell issue 1 and 2 as add-ons. And at first I thought, well, most people are going to be people who have, already bought them. But we ended up selling, I think, so of the third issue, we had like 800 backers, something like that. And of those 800, like 500 of them or something bought back issues as well, which is
awesome. So the new prospects then, this isn't just people who are coming back to you on Kickstarter each time.
Yeah, totally. And it's, and that's the whole thing, making the magazine as nice as possible, that, people want the set almost.
Mm.
We did a few other things. So Matt, who does our covers, he actually physically creates the artwork. It's not digital. And so with each issue, we've done prints, which we've sold for like 25, £30. And they're always really, really popular. We've done t-shirts. That was very popular. And in fact, a slightly odd one with the t-shirt is we actually ran that. There's a crowdfunding site that is dedicated to t-shirts called
Oh,
Everpress.
all right. Uh-huh.
They'll handle all the production. They'll handle all the distribution as well.
They'll know what they're doing, basically. Yeah.
The average pledge on our first Kickstarter was £12 per backer. The average pledge on our third Kickstarter was £41 per backer.
Wow, what a difference. That's amazing. And do you think that's more to do with the back issues or more to do with merch or a mixture of both?
It's a mixture of everything. Also, there's a very important thing in terms of momentum. A lot of campaigns have something, certainly on Kickstarter, you have things called stretch goals. What you'll do is you'll say like, okay, if we get £10,000, we print up this magazine. If we get £15,000, you'll get the magazine and some pin badges and
Mm-hmm.
a tote bag. If you get £20,000, we will we'll upgrade the paper stock. It can be things like that. It can be either extra bonus items, but obviously you have to be very careful you cost that well. You don't want to end up, I've seen that happen with several campaigns where people get carried away with the bonuses and they end up losing all the money that they've made.
I really like that idea. It's something that you can spend just a little bit of money on, and then it feels like a treat for people. So that, and
Yeah,
then you've got that momentum behind you as well. So if people are kind of, oh, I really want that. So okay, I'll join. Yeah, that's really cool.
it's playing on people's basic psychology that, people want those extra things. And because they want it, they're going to go out and they're going to start championing they're going to be the ones who are on Twitter shouting about, everyone check this out, telling their friends about it or whatever, because, they start thinking, it gets this idea that, okay, I'm part of this community, but also originally when I signed up for this, I was getting a book. Now I'm getting a box filled with
Mm. He's
stuff.
really cool.
And psychologically, people love that kind of thing. And certainly that helps with, as I said, that lull period in the middle and getting people involved. If you can set it up so that, there's a reason for people coming back and checking what you're doing and a reason for people shouting about your project because they get something else out of it, then your campaign will inevitably do a lot better.
So when you got to issue 3, then did you have a plan when you were starting out with Kickstarter? Did you do kind of on this date I'm going to do this, on this date I'm going to do that, or was it just kind of okay, I'll be more prepared this time and thinking more about the bundling and so on?
I'd certainly had, thought through, okay, this is what I'm going to do in week 2. I'd contacted people in advance. By the point of doing that, I'd also got quite a popular newsletter going.
Oh, cool.
But the main thing for us with the third one was I wanted to step away from Kickstarter for a bit because I wanted to try and get the magazine a lot more frequent. And if 4 to 6 weeks per issue was being spent just focusing on the Kickstarter campaign, then, that wouldn't have worked.
What was it like transferring that data from Kickstarter to elsewhere?
Well, this is where we really came unstuck because Kickstarter, you get some information. So obviously, you get email addresses and stuff like that because you have to be able to communicate with people. There's obviously GDPR regulations you have to be aware of in terms of, I don't just add everyone to a mailing list, but I encourage them to join up for the mailing list. And that worked really well. But importantly, you don't get their payment information. And this is
Mm.
where we had a bit of a problem because on the third issue, we offered 4-issue subscription. And it was very, it was popular. I think of the, 800 or so people who backed us, a majority, over 400, took out a subscription of some kind, which is great and served the short-term goal. And then when I then moved people details onto the platform I was using for the subscription, because I didn't have their payment details.
Yeah, they have to then go and put in their details again, basically.
Kickstarter is great for launching one-off products. When you're trying to do something that runs for a long time, you really need to think carefully about how you're going to do it.
John, we've covered quite a lot there. Do you want to give us a little synopsis of all the things that we've talked about, maybe? Maybe starting with your, making a plan in the first place.
The key things really is start off when you know what you want to create a magazine about. Make sure you're part of that community on some level. I mean, you don't have to go over the top, but just be present. Make sure that you choose the right crowdfunding site for you. Chances are it's going to be Kickstarter, but you never know. There are certain ones for different countries. Kickstarter isn't available in every country. That's worth bearing in mind. So choose the right site. Make sure that there's similar products or a community there that's done there. So get everything prepared. So when you launch, you want to build up those numbers so that the minute you press that launch button, that email goes out and notifies as many people as humanly possible, and you've primed as many people as possible to jump in early. Have a look at what else you can sell to build up your revenue. As I said, there'll be lots that's particular to your specific niche, subculture, or whatever that you can tap into. And as I said, you'll be surprised at how many people will want to buy t-shirts, will want to buy tote bags, all these kind of things. Set a realistic target. Bear in mind that it looks good if you make X 1000% of what your target is, but at the same point, you don't want to leave yourself out of pocket. Don't freak out when it's middle of the campaign and the numbers have slowed down. That's absolutely normal, but at the same point, don't take your foot off the gas, because you're still getting eyeballs on your campaign. You never know who you might interest, who might come at you, and really help you in a lot. Communicate throughout the process and after the process. You don't have to overdo it. Just keep people updated, let them know it's progressing. And then once the campaign ends, let them know X is happening now, this is happening now. If there's going to be a delay, and inevitably there will be delays,
I think as long as you're honest about those things, I don't think anybody minds, do they? Especially on a first issue, they know that they know to expect that. And nobody's, as much as we love magazines in the magazine community, nobody is sitting beside their front door waiting for your magazine to come through the door, right?
Oh, you like to think so, but yeah, no, sadly that is the truth.
What's the one thing that you think people should take away from this? What do you think is the one thing that they should focus on when it comes to Kickstarter?
Honestly, I think if you've got an idea, try it. Wyrd Science was just an idea knocking around in my head for 2 or 3 years. I didn't have the time and I didn't have the resources. And it seemed like a kind of weird, stupid pipe dream. And it's become a full-time job for me now, because it's, I took a chance on it. People were willing to take a chance on me. And I think that's what makes crowdfunding so interesting.
Thank you, John. It was so nice to talk to you today. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Making Money from Magazines is made and sponsored by Crowdfinder Video, who make cost-effective video and podcasts for magazines. The graphics for the show were made by White Light Media.